This is hands-on with our surface layer scenery. So this includes terrain trays, battle boards, and texture mats. So first we're going to look at terrain trays. Terrain trays are rigid metal plates. The base size is 12 by 12. They're dual-sided, so they have different graphic on each side. They're metal and rigid with magnets, so our anchor magnets on our pieces hold stuff in place. So at one level you can use them. You can pre-build scenes and fly them in using the terrain tray. Also, you can use the terrain tray. This is sample art with our new water texture terrain tray. So this will be the same thing. It'll be a rigid metal, but it'll have this on there. You can use these for negative space builds, where you take something like our banks pieces and you build around it to create negative space where you can expose the terrain tray, the hazard on the terrain tray. In this case, it's like swamp water. It could be lava, it could be acid, it could be quicksand, it could be dirt. You can also do a negative space build using a terrain tray as ground and then using some sculpted tiles for some detail areas. So terrain trays are great for doing things such as building rivers. You can use dirt to build roads, small bodies of water, ponds, and the like. Oh, maybe I should just do quick samples of those, huh? Also good for doing rivers. You can also use terrain trays to make roads or dry riverbeds. So all in all, terrain trays are great for doing small scale negative space builds and for flying in your builds pre-built. And they're double-sided. Battle boards are similar to our terrain trays, but they're thicker. So they have the same neoprene surface as our terrain trays. They have the same metal underneath, so your anchor magnets will stick to them. But they are 11 millimeters high, so you can build them in line with floors. They will be black ABS. This is a early prototype. They have magnets on the bottom and no slip rubber feet. They're meant to be built in line with your pieces, so you can wrap them with banks like such, or you can build them in line with your sculpted floor tiles. So it lets you get some coverage and then change to sculpted floor tiles. Particularly good if you want to build a river between two battle boards, throw it on a terrain tray, use some banks. You've got an instant river. Because they have magnets on the bottom, they'll stick to each other, so they won't slide around. And they're really good for doing gentle elevation changes. So you can use some of your banks and battle boards to do gentle rises in elevation. Because they have magnets on the bottom, they're ideal for when inverted. You can stick your existing terrain trays to them. The magnet will hold the terrain tray in place, and then you can build your terrain trays in line with the floor tiles. Also, because of their thick plastic construction, they are super rigid. They don't bend. Terrain trays have a little flex to them, particularly if you have a heavy, whole bunch of Dwarvenite on them. The battle boards are completely rigid, so even loaded up with huge heavy pieces, they don't flex. My arm may flex, but not the battle board. Battle boards are ideal for fast scatter-based builds. So you can drop down a bunch, throw some scatter terrain, and boom, instant encounter. Battle boards come in 12 by 12 sizes, and we have a mountain and a forest version. Finally, we have our big texture mats. So they'll be this big. This is a mock-up we've done with paper. The official ones will have a texture like this. There'll be this and this bright graphics, but it's a pretty good approximation. This shows you the size mats. So our texture mats, besides having this cool water texture on them, which has the illusion of glistening, moving water, they are ideal for doing big negative space builds. So if I wanted to do a swamp thing and build out some islands, I would do because the texture mats are large, it's very fast to be able to throw one down, throw some banks on it, and have some sort of cool swamp or marsh or island-based encounter. You could also rim the whole thing with banks and build like a bog, and let's see what that looks like. All right, so this is a quick little swamp build you could do where you rim the whole mat with banks, and you have this boggy marsh area in the middle. Texture mats are 24 by 24. We've got swamp water, dismal bog, mountain lake, and they all work great with our banks pieces. They also work with our trifecta ledges. Ooh, and our escarpments. Let's actually knock out a little section of this and put some escarpments in and see what that looks like. All right, so you can, if you want, you can build your escarpments right down onto these texture mats and do something like this, although our transitions leave a little bit to be desired. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to rim this with some trifecta ledges and see what happens. So I'm taking the forest trifecta ledges. And now I'm going to take this space, we're going to fill this with banks. There we go. So now you have sort of escarpments into banks into water texture mat. Something like that. Lots of fun negative space to play on in here. Yeah. Places for your players to get into trouble. You know, maybe this is difficult terrain, or maybe worse, they sink in, or maybe the water is acidic, or has some sort of life-draining property, or whatnot. There we go.